Hey dancers! So today we're going to be doing a little mini anatomy lecture, and then I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite exercises to release crunchy, tight, achy hip flexors. So if you are getting like achy pain in the front of your hip here, if it feels crunchy, or even you might feel a little like click or pop happening, or if you try to lift your leg, it just feels like, oh, ouch, this is for you. So our hip flexors, and the main hip flexor I'm really going to talk about today is our psoas, and this is a hip flexor that basically connects our upper body to our lower body. It starts here in the bottom of the thoracic spine. It comes through the center. It actually crosses from back to front, attaches in our hips here, right? If you feel your hip bone, and then you can feel there's kind of like a dip in, it attaches there, and then it goes down through our hips and attaches to the inside of our femur bone. So it's truly connecting our legs to our spine, essentially. And this is the muscle that anytime you do a kick, an invert, you do a pirouette, anytime you lift your leg up, that is your psoas working. Now we also have a few other hip flexors like the sartorius and our rectus femoris, but the psoas is the one that tends to be the most used and abused. And as dancers, we need this muscle to do everything. Like I said, it's any time that you are moving your leg forward in any kind of way, lifting it at all, that's your psoas involved. And it can get super overworked, especially when we don't have proper care for it, when we don't know how to support it properly with our core and our glutes. And I see so many just poor stretching techniques that dancers are trying to use to, get relief. They feel really tight. And then it can be really frustrating because they still feel that tightness, that tension, and feel like, oh, there's no solution. Like my hips are just always really tight. And when this goes on for a really long time, it can also start to really affect like even your flexibility too. And it can just lead to a whole range of issues. So I want to get into today how to actually give some relief to your tight hip flexors, because this is what I see, this is what kills me, and this is what I used to do too, and it just, it's so bad anatomically for so many reasons. I see a lot of dancers try to stretch their hip flexors and get rid of this tightness here by just like dumping into the hips, really pressing here, sagging through the low back and really just trying to like press, stretch like this, right? And what we're really doing there is we're more just putting a lot of strain onto the ligaments and tendons here. There's not actually a stretch happening in the psoas. You might feel like you're getting a lot of sensation, you might even be getting some in the leg, but you're not actually doing anything for the psoas, which is more in your core and kind of like your lower torso area. So one, this can be really incredibly damaging if you're always just like dumping into the front of your hips. Especially if you are hypermobile, you are just like irreparably damaging that joint right here. So we really want to avoid just always stretching and like collapsing here. There's no stability here. This can be really dangerous and lead to even more pain or hip injuries. Just, it's not good. So what we actually want to do here, first stretch I'm going to show you. This is like one of my go-tos. All of my students know this stretch. This is like one of the first things you will learn pretty much in my program, Yoga for Dance Academy, but I'm going to share it with you guys here. When we do a stretch, when we want to do a lunge is a great exercise, but not if we are collapsing and sinking here, okay? What you actually want to do is, first of all, make sure your hips are squared. If your hips are opening at all, you're kind of going to bypass. You're not going to get the stretch where it needs to be. So you want to square off your hips. So come on down and do this with me. And now, really important part here is to tuck your pelvis. So we are not wanting to arch. We are not wanting to dump. We are trying to actually do the opposite. We are squeezing our glutes, using our core as well to really like tuck the pelvis while keeping the hips squared, okay? So this is going to be a very active stretch. We are not just hanging out and hoping we feel a stretch. We are creating the stretch through actively holding our body in this position. That's actually going to create a little bit of lengthening in the area where the psoas is. I can feel it already. So, and also this is going to be protecting the front of your hip because you're not dumping into it. So this is just so much better. Squaring off, tucking, really lengthening. So you also want to make sure your ribs aren't like splaying out at all. And squeezing. And now what you're going to do, once you have all of this going, you might already feel a stretch. You might notice when you don't even have to lean forward sometimes. You just really, by like squeezing and tucking, will start to feel sensation all the way up through here. But if you need a little bit more, you can reach that arm up and really think about from your fingertip all the way down to your knee is getting lengthened here, shoulder down, ribs in, tuck, 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 squeeze. Even here, I'm like, woo. And then what you can do is drop your chin to your chest while holding this. And you're almost trying to curl your pubic bone to your face. And whoo, yes, there it is. Might hurt so good. You can use a wall. You can also kind of lean over if you want to do a little bit of a side reach here, but you need to make sure that you don't let this go. The squaring off and the tucking. Ooh, and then, yep, you can tuck your chin to your chest. That's really gonna make it so good. And then you're just gonna breathe here. So kind of play around, see if you do need to shift forward, but if you do shift forward, don't let this happen, okay? This needs to really be squeezing through the booty here. Keeping that tuck. Keeping that length through the spine too, try and not collapse. This is a very active, lifted, supported pose here. And now you can feel there's a stretch happening, probably like in this whole area. It might hurt real good. And we're not doing it by dumping and collapsing into our joints. So you're gonna breathe here. Feels so good, hurts so good, yes, yes, yes. And here we're really trying to target more the front of the hip. And now what you can do to get into the TFL, our tensor fasciae lata, which isn't technically a hip flexor, but it can get really tight too. And since we're here, might as well do it. So if you're kind of in this lunge, right, all you're gonna do is cross this leg over the center line. So usually it's kind of like your knees are like hips width apart. You wanna cross that leg over, so now it's kind of like your knee is in line with your foot. And then you're gonna keep the same principle, tucking, squaring off, and now you're gonna kind of let your hip lean out. Ooh, yep, there it is, lean a little bit to the side. So I'm essentially, you might wanna use a chair or a wall here, but my foot is here and you're very crossed. Without like collapsing, you're gonna let it lean over. Oh yeah, nice little side stretch here. So it's really important here that you don't start to shift and arch. You still want to keep that tuck, but then let your hips lean over and then like, ooh, it should feel like essentially trying to target right here. You'll probably get a nice side torso stretch as well, and just breathing there. Squeeze, squeeze, and tuck. Don't forget about that. And then breathe also, and find that place where you're like, ooh, getting that sensation, but you can still breathe. You're not in like so much pain that your body is tensing up. Beautiful. So let's try this on the other side now. So we're gonna start with just the front of the hip first, taking that 90-degree angle with the knee. This also protects your knee joint too, because you're not putting strain on your knee. Squaring off. Tucking. This booty never lets go, okay? It is squeezing, it is active. And keeping that tuck, that square, really think like, ooh, pulling it forward as much as you can. And then reaching that arm up, lengthening through the spine without arching through the back and opening up the ribs. And then you can let the chin drop to your chest. And right away, once you do that drop and you're really squeezing and tucking, it's like, wah, all the way through. You can also do a little bit of a side reach. And breathe, okay? Especially like breathe into your belly, but don't let the booty relax here. The booty is creating the stretch. This also is going to actually help you increase your flexibility because it's active, because there's this stabilization factor here. when we're here, there's like no stability, right? So your body will actually feel safer to allow you to experience a deeper stretch when there's a sense of, oh, we're also safe, we have control over the stretch, our muscles are supporting us, there's no risk of muscle damage here. So when you actually include an active component to your stretching, a lot of the times you're gonna get a lot more, they're gonna be a lot more productive, and you're gonna gain flexibility, but more importantly, mobility faster, because there's actually gonna be strength and stability within the flexibility. So now let's do that TFL stretch, crossing that leg over a little bit more, finding that same tuck, letting the hips kind of boop out to the side, and then reaching, and then, yep, it's like, you should feel a difference. Like the first one was kind of more in the front, this one's gonna be much more down the side. And really lengthening as you reach. And you might notice, okay, one side is like tighter than the other. I feel like my left side was a little more tight. This is also just a great side stretch as well. Oh, feels so good. And breathe. Beautiful. Coming up. Now, one other thing that's really important for the psoas, because those stretches are good, but they're not gonna do everything that you need if you're really feeling that tightness. I want you to grab a therapy ball, which is a lacrosse ball or a racquetball therapy ball. They're all the same thing. You can do this with a tennis ball, but this has a little bit more give. It has a little bit more squish than a tennis ball, which sometimes is necessary so that it's not so like so hard, especially because when we get into the exercise we're about to do, it can feel very tender, and we need to just treat our body with love and really listen to it and find that good edge where we're like, oh, there is sensation, but you can also like kind of settle and breathe into it, and you're not just like waiting for it to be done. So why this is important is because the stretching is great, and as you felt, it's kind of more down here. We still don't want to neglect the part of our psoas that is more in our core area, and this is a great myofascial release, which basically means that we're not stretching, we're not pulling on it, we're almost giving it a little bit of a massage, which is very, very important, because that's psoas. It works hard, it needs a massage. This should be a staple in your life. So what you're gonna do is basically anywhere in this whole region, from down by your hip up through this, pocket in your pelvis, even up sometimes like more towards your ribs in here, is all fair game, okay? So you're basically gonna come and do one side at a time and just see, getting that ball in there. Once you find a spot that feels kind of like, that is tender, that is tight, go ahead and hold it there. So you kind of want to take a few breaths, settle in, kind of explore around, see if you can find any place that feels like, it's a little crunchy there. And then we're just going to breathe here, and I want you to just think about like letting gravity sink in. Sometimes it can help to tuck this foot and get that knee off the ground. Sometimes it can help to come up into a little like cobra here, or you can come down. The cobra and the tuck of the toes is going to make it a little bit more intense. So just kind of exploring around in there. Yep, there it is. So once you find a spot that feels like, that gets a little like sensitive when you get the ball on it, I want you to hold it there and just breathe. Because it could be very tender, especially if you've never done this before and you have really tight hip flexors. So you just want to be gentle here, kind of let your body slowly melt around the ball. And just close your eyes and like take a moment to go within and really feel your body and send your body some love. Sometimes it's not uncommon for doing this exercise to actually bring up emotions. This could come in the form of feeling a little bit of stress or anxiety, or sometimes I've experienced, and I've had some of my clients experience, like doing this even makes them like cry and can release like almost a wave of emotion out of nowhere. And that's because the psoas is really deeply connected with our nervous system. And it can be a muscle that not only is working incredibly hard all the time, but it actually tends to hold a lot of our stress and a lot of our unprocessed, unhealed, unreleased emotions. It's really connected with like our fear and kind of almost like primal survival reactive brain, kind of the more reptilian brain that has everything to do with our survival instincts. And so it's like, you know, the muscle that if you fall or if you like someone's attacking you, you feel that like, that like your knee, that protective instinct of like, to try and protect yourself. That's your psoas, right? Like you don't even have to think about it, or that's just one example, but it can really be connected to a lot of our stress. So just something to know if you're like, why is this making me angry, or why am I feeling stressed out, to just breathe through it. It's not uncommon. There's a lot of different ways that how our emotional body is feeling is going to actually affect what's happening in our physical bodies. So this is a great thing to do also if you deal with a lot of stress and your hip flexors are really tight. This is going to be really good to do. Also practicing belly breath, like diaphragmatic breathing, and actively taking time to kind of release some tension, because a lot of times, especially as dancers, oh my god, especially as if you do ballet, oh girl, like we're so used to holding our breath and holding everything in and like tight, right? Like there's so much stomach shame in the dance world that we can really get into a habit of not using our full diaphragmatic breath, which is also going to create tension in the psoas. One, because the breath kind of gives a little movement, can give a little bit of a massage to our digestive organs and our psoas. But also if we're not breathing, our stress levels are going to be increased. And when our stress levels are increased, our psoas is going to hold a lot more of that stress and become tighter. So there's a lot of layers to what could be making your hip flexors tight. So this is a good way to just like, in a non-stretching way. Oh yeah. If you have dancer's hip, which is basically when like if you lift or move your leg, you get a little like click where it feels like something's like clunking or popping, that is your psoas. So this is a good exercise to do that can start to get rid of some of that clicking and popping. It's basically your psoas sliding over your, can't remember if it's your greater trochanter or your lesser trochanter, but it's basically popping over the place where it connects to your femur bone. So we're gonna take this side out. You might even notice just coming down, like which side feels more stretchy. For me, it's this, like I can feel like my hip is really like grounded. It feels like there's a little bit of tension on my left side. Doing this can actually unlock a lot of spinal flexibility as well. Like there's just a more sense of like spaciousness and like looseness. So this is also great if you are like, I want to get like back bends and not feel like I'm just crunching into my low back or feeling really limited. So let's go ahead and get into that other side. Left side is a little more sore. Yep, there it is. So you can really play around with like how you're leaning and like shifting your hips and kind of just get in there and listen to your body. Move slow too. It's not going to be that helpful if you're just like really being fast. You want to take this slow and kind of ease into it and let your body speak to you. I'm like, that's a yes, that's a no. Like where do you need this? Yeah. And then don't forget to breathe. Breathing tells the body it can let go a little bit, which is going to help the psoas embrace the ball a little bit more and not be like our psoas is like a cat. You have to gently approach it. If you come on too strong and get all aggressive, it's gonna like hiss and run away. So you need to be like gentle. So this is really, guys, I cannot stress how important doing this particular exercise is. The stretches are great and they feel sometimes like you're doing more, but this is really, really, really important because those stretches can't really get into this part of the psoas. The stretches are great and I love them, but this is just as important to really make an important part of your routine. And if you're someone who gets really bad period cramps, like if you are just like in pain, your low back hurts, sometimes, and I know there can be a lot of different reasons why we have bad cramps. It can be hormonal things, it can be a lot, it can be endometriosis, stuff like that, but there have been studies to show that people who have really tight psoases tend to have worse cramps because the psoas actually goes right over, it goes right over the uterus and the ovaries, and so if it is really tight, it can sort of clamp down, right, and feel like there's just a lot of tightness in your womb area when it needs like to be able to, to do its thing. When you're on your period, when it's feeling a little more inflamed, when it needs to like move. And I have noticed within myself that the more I do this, the less bad my period cramps have been. And when I kind of neglect this and I haven't been dealing with my stress and I've been neglecting my belly breathing and stress management, my cramps are always worse. So this is also another benefit of doing that, is releasing some of that tension around your uterus, and also can help release some of the pain and tightness and achiness you might feel in your low back while you're on your period. So you could do this while you're on your period, but I recommend doing it before, just building it as a habit for preventative medicine. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, there it is. So you can stay here as long as you like. I honestly recommend like 10 minutes aside, like every day, every other day. But for today's class purposes, we're just gonna end there, but then just take a moment and notice like, whoa, how much more released to the floor do your hips feel, right? You can do, it's like, oh wow. It's a lot easier to like stretch. So this really can unlock spinal flexibility. So those are a few exercises that I really like. And before we wrap up, one other main thing you need to understand is that these stretches and the myofascial release are great. They are not going to entirely prevent pain if you are not working your core. If you do not know how to properly activate your glutes and your deep core, your transverse abs, that they're not working to support your psoas in all the crazy movements we do in dance, you're going to continue to have chronically tight hip flexors. Working your core is one of the best things you can do to support your hip flexors. And even if you think, Roxy, I do my crunches, I do my core work, I promise you, you should investigate a little deeper to see, are you really working your deeper core, or are you just working the more superficial layer of your rectus abs? I have a lot of videos on how to make sure that you're working your deep core and how to really fire up your deepest centers and the deepest layers of your core, because that is going to be key in keeping your hip flexors healthy, in keeping your back healthy, your sacrum, everything. So I would really encourage you to, even if you think you do your core work correctly, watch some of my videos, take some of my core classes, because there's a highly likely chance that you are not. And I'm only saying this as someone who also used to think that she knew how to do core work. I would work out a lot, I would always be doing my ab workouts, and then I still ended up getting a low back injury and had a lot of issues with my spine and my psoas. And when I did further research, when I was in my healing process, realized that I actually had no idea how to switch on the deepest layers of the core. And if you don't learn how to switch them on, they're just gonna stay asleep. And then that means your psoas and your hip flexors have to work twice as hard, because your rectus abs don't really have anything to do with really supporting the spine. So please do your core work, do your booty work. I'll drop some classes that I recommend below of mine where you can learn how to do that. but I hope that these exercises help you today. And if you want to learn more about how your body really works, make sure that you know how to properly stretch, how to overcome your limitations or places where you're chronically pain, places that might be holding you back and limiting you from being able to dance as magically and freely as you want to. This is covered in depth in my program, YDA, Yoga for Dance Academy. As we kind of learned today, we explored there can be both an emotional and a physical reason that we're experiencing pain, achiness, tightness, and limitation, that there's always multiple layers from what's happening in your nervous system to, are you stretching right? How is your form? Where is your alignment? Do you even know that these muscles exist and how to work with them? So that's what we teach, or that's what I teach in the program, is how to really understand your body and understand all the layers and how they work together to create our physical reality and how we're able to dance, how safe we are while we're dancing, and also if you can really, access and reach your potential as a dancer. If you feel like you're limited or stuck, or that you've been plateauing, or you've just been feeling like, oh my God, I can only go so hard, or get to a certain level before my body just hurts, this is the program for you so that you can start to overcome some of those plateaus and those barriers and overall just feel way more flexible and strong and healthy and energized in your whole body. So if you want more info on that, you can check the link below and you can grab a spot on the wait list. I usually run this program every 4 months in a small group, so it is a small intimate container. But thanks for coming to class today. I hope you enjoyed this little lecture, and I hope you enjoyed these poses and exercises, and I will see you soon. Mwah!